Welcome to the Sci-Fi Codes channel. Have fun listening to this story. Don't forget to subscribe. With the subscribe button, Chapter 1, The Fall of Nova Prime. The stars bore silent witness to humanity's darkest hour. Once a beacon of hope and progress on the edges of human space, Nova Prime now lay in ruins. The Zarai Empire, a race of highly advanced insectoid aliens, had struck without warning or mercy. Their assault was swift, brutal, and unfathomably cruel. Commander Elena Reeves stood before the holographic display in Earth Central Command, her fists clenched at her sides. The images flickering before her eyes told a tale too horrific to process. The cities of Nova Prime, once gleaming metropolises, were now smoldering craters. But it was the death toll that truly chilled her to the core. 800,000 children, Admiral Jackson Chen murmured, his voice barely a whisper. They specifically targeted schools, daycares, pediatric hospitals. This wasn't just an attack, it was genocide. Elena's voice cracked as she finished his thought. Genocide, she echoed, her eyes welling with tears as she thought of her sister and young niece who had called Nova Prime home. They were among the countless lost. The room was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft beeping of consoles and the occasional sharp intake of breath from the gathered military and political leaders, each grappling with the magnitude of the atrocity. President Lydia Ortiz, her face ashen, finally spoke. "We need to understand why. Has there been any communication from the Zarai? Any demands or declarations?" A young intelligence officer stepped forward, a tablet in hand. "Nothing direct, Madam President, but we've intercepted some of their internal communications. It seems they view us as a potential threat to their dominion. The attack on Nova Prime was meant to, in their words, cull the human infestation before it spreads." Elena felt a surge of rage course through her. Infestation? They murdered children to send a message. Admiral Chen placed a calming hand on her shoulder, though his eyes blazed with cold fury. The Zarai Empire has been expanding unchecked for centuries. We've heard similar stories from other species, refugees fleeing their advance. They don't conquer, they exterminate. President Ortiz leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly on the table. "Options. I need options. We can't let this stand, but we're talking about an empire that spans half the galaxy. We've barely taken our first steps into interstellar space." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices. Some argued for immediate retaliation, others for seeking allies among other spacefaring races. A few even suggested capitulation, hoping to negotiate some form of coexistence. Elena listened to it all, her mind racing. She thought of her sister, her niece who would never see her 6th birthday, and the millions of families torn apart, the future that had been stolen from an entire generation. In that moment, she knew humanity could not afford to be timid. "We fight," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. All eyes turned to her. "We fight with everything we have, not just for vengeance, but for survival. The Zarai have made it clear, there's no coexistence with them. It's us or them." Admiral Chen nodded slowly, a grim smile forming on his weathered face. "Commander Reeves is right, but we can't fight them conventionally. We need to be smarter, more adaptable. We need to hit them in ways they won't expect." He stepped to the central holodisplay, bringing up a galactic map. "I propose Operation Nemesis, a multi-pronged approach combining guerrilla tactics, technological innovation, and diplomatic outreach to other species who've suffered under Zarai oppression." As Chen outlined his plan, Elena felt a glimmer of hope kindle in her chest. It was audacious, perhaps even desperate, but it played to humanity's strengths, adaptability, ingenuity, and an indomitable will to survive against all odds. President Ortiz listened intently, her expression grave but resolute. When Chen finished, she stood, looking each person in the room in the eye. "What we're contemplating isn't just a war. It's a fight for the very survival of our species. If we commit to this, there's no turning back. We will likely suffer losses that will dwarf even what happened on Nova Prime." She paused, taking a deep breath. "But we cannot allow such an atrocity to go unanswered. We cannot cower in fear while a hostile power decides whether our children have the right to exist. If we don't stand now, we may never get another chance." President Ortiz's gaze fell on Elena. "Commander Reeves, you've suffered a personal loss in this attack. I won't order you to be part of this operation, but if you're willing, I believe your insight and your motivation could be invaluable." Elena straightened, feeling the weight of history settle on her shoulders. "Madam President, Admiral, I'm not just willing. I volunteer to lead the first strike team. The Zarai need to learn that when you wound humanity, when you spill the blood of our innocent, you've sealed your own fate." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. "Then it's settled. We'll begin preparations immediately. The Zarai think they've broken our spirit that will fade quietly into the void. They're about to learn how gravely mistaken they are." As the meeting adjourned and leaders rushed to their respective tasks, Elena remained before the holographic display, staring at the image of Nova Prime, now nothing more than a scarred and lifeless rock. "I promise you," she whispered to the ghosts of the fallen, "your deaths will not be in vain. We will avenge you, and we will ensure that no other world suffers your fate." With a final determined nod, Elena turned and strode from the room. The die was cast. Humanity would not go gently into the night. They would rage against the dying of the light, and the galaxy would never be the same. Chapter 2. Preparations and First Strike. The next 6 months saw humanity transform itself with a speed and determination that would have seemed impossible before the Nova Prime massacre. Every aspect of society was mobilized towards a single goal: survival against an implacable foe. Commander Elena Reeves found herself at the heart of this whirlwind of activity. Operation Nemesis had moved from concept to reality with breathtaking speed, and she now stood before a group of the most elite soldiers Earth had to offer. "You've all seen the briefings," Elena began, her voice echoing across the cavernous training facility. "The Zarai are technologically advanced, numerically superior, and utterly ruthless. By all conventional metrics, this war is unwinnable." A ripple of tension passed through the assembled troops. Elena allowed herself a grim smile. "Fortunately, humanity has never much cared for conventional metrics. We're not here to fight a conventional war. We're here to rewrite the rules of engagement." She gestured, and a holographic display sprang to life behind her, showing schematics of advanced weaponry and stealth systems. "Thanks to round-the-clock efforts from our best scientific minds, we've made breakthroughs that would have taken decades under normal circumstances." Dr. Aisha Patel, the lead scientist of Project Prometheus, stepped forward. Her eyes were sunken from months of sleepless nights, but they burned with an intense fire. "We've reverse-engineered several key components of Zarai technology from debris recovered from Nova Prime. More importantly, we've improved upon them." She manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on what looked like a standard assault rifle. "This is the XM-12 Phantom. It incorporates a miniaturized cloaking field, allowing for near-perfect optical and thermal camouflage. Its ammunition is designed to bypass Zarai energy shields, delivering a payload that disrupts their unique biology." Elena watched as the soldiers leaned forward, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of awe and anticipation. She knew that look well. It was the same one she saw in the mirror every morning, the desire for payback, tempered by the weight of humanity's survival resting on their shoulders. "You'll be spending the next month training with these new systems," Elena continued. "You'll eat, sleep, and breathe this technology until it becomes an extension of your own bodies, because when we strike, we'll have one shot at this. We have to make it count." As the troops dispersed to begin their training, Admiral Chen approached Elena. "Impressive speech," he said quietly. "How are you holding up?" Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm focused on the mission, sir. Personal feelings don't enter into it." Chen's weathered face softened slightly. "They do, Elena. That's what makes you human. It's what separates us from the Zarai. Just don't let it consume you." Before Elena could respond, an aide rushed up, his face flushed with excitement. "Commander Admiral, we've got something. The deep space listening posts have picked up Zarai communications. We've located one of their forward operating bases, just at the edge of what used to be the Nova Prime solar system." Chen and Elena exchanged a look. This was the opportunity they'd been waiting for. "Prep the team," Chen ordered. "We move in 48 hours. Chapter 3. The First Strike." The next 2 days were a blur of final preparations and briefings. Elena stood in the hangar bay of the UES Nemesis, Earth's most advanced stealth frigate, watching as her strike team made final equipment checks. "This is it, people," she said. her voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Operation Nemesis begins now. Our target is a Zarai outpost believed to be coordinating the ongoing occupation of Nova Prime. It's heavily fortified and bristling with defenses, but we have the element of surprise on our side. The plan was simple in theory, though far from easy in execution. Use the Nemesis's stealth capabilities to insert the team undetected, infiltrate the base, and plant a subspace charge at the core of the outpost's command center. Once detonated, the charge would create a localized subspace rift, obliterating the base and everything in it. As the Nemesis slipped into warp, Elena gathered her team one final time. Remember why we're here. This isn't just about retaliation. It's about showing the Zarai that we won't be hunted like animals. It's about making them fear us as much as we fear them. Minutes later, the Nemesis emerged from warp, its stealth systems rendering it invisible to Zarai sensors. Elena felt the familiar jolt of adrenaline as the strike team disembarked, moving silently through the corridors of the alien base. They encountered resistance almost immediately. Zarai soldiers, towering and insectoid with chitinous armor and multi-jointed limbs, poured into the corridors to repel the human intruders. But the phantom rifles worked as advertised. Zarai shields fizzled and failed under the onslaught of humanity's latest innovation, and alien warriors fell in droves. The command center was within sight when the alarms blared, and the lights shifted to a pulsating red. "They know we're here," one of the soldiers called out, his voice taut with tension. Elena didn't hesitate. "Push forward. We're almost there." The final sprint to the command center was a blur of gunfire, screams, and the acrid scent of burning circuits. Elena and her team fought with a fury born of desperation and loss. When they finally breached the command center doors, Elena sprinted to the core, planting the subspace charge with practiced efficiency. "Charge is set," she shouted over the din. "Fall back. We've got 30 seconds. The team pulled back, moving faster than they ever had, the countdown ticking inexorably towards zero. As the Nemesis's extraction beam locked onto them, Elena glanced back at the base, now a chaotic hive of frantic Zarai trying to comprehend the impending disaster. The subspace charge detonated just as the Nemesis jumped to warp, and the Zarai outpost vanished in a cataclysmic implosion of space and time. For the first time since the fall of Nova Prime, Elena allowed herself a small, fierce smile. This was just the beginning. Chapter 4. The Ripple Effect. The aftermath of the strike was a mix of triumph and uncertainty. The destruction of the Zarai outpost sent shockwaves through the galaxy, both in terms of the Zarai's operational capabilities and the morale of their enemies. Humanity's first major victory had not only provided a much-needed boost to Earth's war effort, but also sparked a glimmer of hope among other oppressed species. In the weeks following the successful strike, Elena and her team were hailed as heroes. Their actions had not only disrupted the Zarai's operations, but also demonstrated that the Empire was not invincible. For the first time, other civilizations began to consider the possibility of joining forces against the Zarai. Elena found herself back in Earth Central Command, where the mood had shifted from despair to cautious optimism. President Ortiz, Admiral Chen, and a variety of ambassadors from allied races gathered around a holotable, where a new set of intelligence reports were displayed. "We've received communications from several alien factions," Admiral Chen reported. "Some have offered support, while others have asked for assurances of humanity's continued resilience. The Zarai are on the defensive in some sectors, but they're also retaliating with increased aggression." Elena studied the display, her fingers tracing the holographic projections of Zarai-occupied systems and their newly bolstered defenses. It's clear the Zarai won't take this lying down. They'll intensify their efforts to quash any sign of rebellion. "Which is why our next moves are critical," President Ortiz said, her gaze meeting Elena's. "We need to consolidate our alliances and exploit the Zarai's momentary vulnerability. What's your assessment, Commander?" Elena took a deep breath. "We should focus on strategic sabotage and intelligence gathering. Our recent victory proved that we can hit them where it hurts, but we need to avoid direct large-scale engagements until we've built up our forces and understanding of their tactics." The President nodded, considering Elena's words. "Agreed. We'll prioritize forming a coalition of free worlds. In the meantime, we'll ramp up our own research and development. The next phase of our campaign will be crucial." As the meeting concluded, Alina left the room to meet with Dr. Aisha Patel. The scientist was working on the latest advancements in weaponry and defensive systems, and Alina needed to discuss their progress. "How's the development going, Doctor?" "Patel?" Alina asked as she entered the lab. Dr. Patel looked up from a console cluttered with schematics and prototypes. "We've made significant progress. The latest tech enhancements will improve our ability to counter Zarai countermeasures. We're also working on a new type of drone designed to sabotage Zarai energy shields from within." Alina's eyes gleamed with interest. "That could be a game changer. How long before it's operational?" Patel frowned slightly. "It's in the final testing phase. We should have a prototype ready for field trials within the month. But the real challenge is integrating it into our existing strategies." "Keep me updated," Alina said, nodding. "We need every advantage we can get." As Alina left the lab, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight against the Zarai was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had made a decisive move in the struggle for survival. The ripple effects of their success were beginning to reshape the broader conflict. Before proceeding, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. Months passed, and Operation Nemesis continued to unfold with a series of high-risk operations, each aimed at destabilizing the Zarai Empire's grip on the galaxy. As Alina led her team on a new mission targeting a Zarai research facility, the stakes were higher than ever. Their objective was to infiltrate and gather data on a new Zarai weapon, rumored to have the capability to suppress interstellar communications, an advantage the Zarai would use to isolate human and allied forces. The mission began with the Nemesis slipping into the research facility's vicinity, cloaked and silent. Alina's team moved with practiced efficiency, slipping through the facility's outer defenses and making their way to the central data core. But as they approached their target, they encountered an unexpected complication. "Commander, we've got Zarai patrols moving in our direction," one of the soldiers reported, his voice tense. Alina peered through a viewport and saw the insectoid figures advancing toward their location. "Damn it, we need to accelerate. We'll have to split up to avoid detection. We'll rendezvous at the extraction point in 30 minutes. The team executed their plan with precision, navigating through the labyrinthine corridors of the facility. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as they encountered increasingly fierce resistance. As they reached the data core, she worked quickly to extract the necessary information. Just as they were about to leave, Alina's communicator crackled to life with an urgent transmission. "Commander, we've intercepted a Zarai communication. There's something you need to see." Alina paused, frowning as she accessed the transmission. The message was fragmented, but the parts she could decipher were chilling. The Zarai were not only developing new weapons, but also planning a large-scale offensive targeting human and allied worlds simultaneously. "We need to get this data back to Earth Central immediately," Alina said, her voice sharp. "The Zarai are planning something massive, and we have to be ready." The team made a swift retreat, barely managing to avoid a full-scale confrontation with the Zarai forces. As they boarded the Nemesis and jumped to warp, Alina couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over her. Back at Earth Central Command, the data was analyzed, and the implications were dire. President Ortiz convened an emergency meeting to discuss their findings. "The Zarai are preparing for a simultaneous offensive across multiple fronts," the president said, her face grave. "We need to fortify our defenses and ensure our alliances are ready to respond." Alina, standing at the edge of the room, felt the weight of the coming storm. The victories of the past months had been significant, but they had also awakened the Zarai's wrath. The galaxy was on the brink of an all-out war, and the choices made in the coming weeks would determine the fate of countless worlds. As the meeting concluded, Alina remained behind, staring at the holographic projection of the galaxy. The war was far from over, and humanity's struggle against the Zarai was entering its most critical phase. With a determined breath, she prepared herself for the challenges ahead. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. The months following the discovery of the Zarai's planned offensive were a whirlwind of frantic preparation and strategic maneuvering. Earth Central Command, now a bustling hub of military and diplomatic activity, was a hive of activity, as the coalition forces worked to strengthen their defenses and coordinate their response. Alina Reeves, now deeply entrenched in both tactical planning and diplomatic efforts, found herself balancing multiple roles. Her leadership in Operation Nemesis had earned her respect across the coalition, and she was often called upon to offer insights or make crucial decisions. One day, as Alina was reviewing intelligence reports in her office, Admiral Chen entered with a somber expression. "We've just received word from the Federation of Free Worlds. They've encountered a Zarai scouting fleet on the edge of their territory. It's clear the Zarai are testing their defenses and preparing for their offensive." Alina nodded, her mind racing. "We need to act quickly. If the Zarai are probing for weaknesses, we have to ensure our allies are fortified and ready," Chen agreed. "We've also been contacted by the Elysian Council. They're willing to provide additional resources and troops, but they're concerned about the stability of their own systems. They're asking for assurances that the coalition can offer protection against Zarai retaliation." Alina sighed. "We need to reassure them and solidify our alliances. I'll draft a response outlining our joint strategies and defense plans." As Alina worked on the communication, she couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The Zarai were a relentless and formidable enemy, and their upcoming offensive would be a test of humanity's resolve and ingenuity. In the weeks that followed, the coalition's preparations continued at a fever pitch. New defensive installations were set up, and alliances were solidified as different species united under the common cause of resisting the Zarai threat. Alina and her team undertook a series of missions to disrupt Zarai supply lines and sabotage key infrastructure. Each success was a small victory, but the looming threat of the Zarai's full-scale offensive cast a shadow over every achievement. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than expected. The Zarai's massive assault began with a series of coordinated attacks across multiple fronts. The galaxy was engulfed in chaos as Zarai forces launched devastating strikes against human and allied worlds. Alina stood on the bridge of the UES Nemesis, watching as the stars outside flickered with the light of distant battles. The coalition forces were engaged in fierce combat, fighting to repel the Zarai's onslaught and protect their worlds. "We're holding our own, but the pressure is intense," Admiral Chen reported, his voice strained with the effort of managing the fleet's movements. Alina nodded, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. "We need to continue pressuring the Zarai and capitalize on any weaknesses we can exploit. Our goal is to turn the tide in our favor." As the battle raged on, Alina felt a deep sense of purpose. The fight was far from over, but humanity and its allies were showing resilience and determination. The war against the Zarai had entered a new phase, and the outcome would determine the future of countless worlds. With the gathering storm of conflict swirling around them, Alina and her team pressed on, driven by the hope that their efforts would one day lead to a lasting peace and a future where the shadows of war would no longer cast their long, dark reach across the galaxy. Chapter 7. The Turning Tide. The Coalition's defense against the Zarai onslaught was a grueling test of endurance and strategy. Each battle was a high-stakes struggle, with planets and space stations across the galaxy coming under fierce attack. The Zarai's tactics were brutal and relentless, but the combined strength of the human and allied forces was starting to show signs of resilience. Alina Reeves was once again in the heart of the action, coordinating a critical operation aimed at striking a decisive blow against the Zarai. The target was a massive Zarai command ship that had been directing the offensive and deploying reinforcements to various fronts. Intelligence suggested that destroying this ship could severely disrupt the Zarai's operational capabilities. The mission was fraught with danger. The command ship was heavily guarded, and the coalition forces were preparing for a high-risk strike. Alina briefed her team, the same group that had fought so bravely in their previous operations. They were equipped with the latest technology and ready for what could be the most dangerous mission of their careers. "All right, everyone," Alina said, her voice steady. "This is our chance to deal a significant blow to the Zarai's command structure. We've got one shot at this. We need to penetrate their defenses, disable their command and control systems, and ensure the ship is destroyed. No room for error." As the strike team boarded the Nemesis, the tension was palpable. The crew worked with the precision of a well-oiled machine, executing the plan with exacting accuracy. The Nemesis approached the Zarai command ship under the cover of stealth, and Alina's team disembarked, infiltrating the command vessel through a series of covert entry points. The interior of the command ship was a labyrinth of metallic corridors and pulsating alien technology. The team moved swiftly and silently, encountering occasional Zarai patrols, which they dealt with efficiently. Their goal was to reach the command center and plant a series of explosives designed to disable the ship's core systems. As they neared their target, Elena's communicator crackled with a new update from Admiral Chen. "Commander, we've intercepted Zarai communications, indicating that they've just launched a new offensive on the Elysian homeworld. They're expecting a major push from us at any moment." Elena's heart sank at the news. The Elysian homeworld was a critical ally, and an attack on them could have devastating consequences for the Coalition. "Understood, Admiral. We're almost at the command center. We'll proceed with the mission, and then redirect our efforts to support the Elysian defense." The team reached the command center and set the explosives. As they prepared to leave, the alarms began to blare, signaling that their presence had been detected. The command ship's corridors erupted into chaos as Zarai forces converged on their position. "Move, move, move!" Elena shouted, leading her team in a desperate sprint back to the extraction point. They fought their way through the swarming Zarai, each step bringing them closer to their goal. With moments to spare, the team reached the extraction point and boarded the Nemesis. As they jumped to warp, the command ship was consumed by a massive explosion, sending shockwaves through the Zarai fleet. The disruption was immediate, with Zarai ships faltering and their offensive momentum beginning to wane. Elena took a moment to catch her breath as the Nemesis re-emerged from warp. "We've done it. The command ship is destroyed. Now let's get to the Elysian homeworld and lend our support." The team's success in disabling the Zarai command ship marked a turning point in the conflict. The tide of the war began to shift as the Zarai struggled to regroup and adapt to the new challenges posed by the Coalition's coordinated resistance. Chapter 8. Dawn of Hope. The aftermath of the attack on the Zarai command ship was a period of intense rebuilding and reorganization for the Coalition. The disruption to the Zarai's command structure had provided a crucial window of opportunity for the Allied forces to regain their footing and mount a more effective defense. Elena Reeves and her team were hailed as heroes, their successful mission a symbol of hope and resilience for the galaxy. The Coalition, now emboldened by their recent victories, began to plan for a counteroffensive aimed at reclaiming lost territories and striking at the heart of the Zarai Empire. In the war room of Earth Central Command, President Ortiz, Admiral Chen, and Elena gathered with leaders from various Allied factions to discuss the next steps. The mood was cautiously optimistic, the recent successes having breathed new life into their efforts. "We've gained valuable intelligence and secured some strategic victories," President Ortiz said, addressing the assembled leaders. "But we must now turn our attention to the next phase of our campaign. Our objective is to press our advantage, liberate occupied worlds, and force the Zarai into a position where they are no longer able to sustain their offensive." Admiral Chen nodded in agreement. "We've identified key targets for our next operations. These include Zarai supply hubs, production facilities, and additional command centers. We'll need to coordinate our efforts carefully to maximize the impact." Elena leaned forward, her mind already racing with potential strategies. "We should consider a multi-pronged approach. While we target Zarai infrastructure, we should also focus on rallying support from any remaining unaligned species and fortifying our existing alliances." The discussion turned to detailed planning, with each leader contributing their insights and expertise. Elena's focus remained on the larger strategy, working to ensure that the Coalition's efforts were unified and effective. As the meeting concluded, Elena stepped outside into the bustling corridors of Central Command. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of purpose and determination. For the first time in a long while, there was a tangible sense of hope that the tide of the war could be turned in humanity's favor. In the following weeks, the Coalition launched a series of successful operations, liberating several key worlds from Zarai control and gaining further ground in the conflict. The alliance between human and alien forces solidified, with newfound cooperation leading to breakthroughs in technology and strategy. Elena found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The losses endured and the battles fought had been immense, but they had also forged a stronger and more resilient alliance. As the Coalition forces continued to push back against the Zarai, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose and resolve. Standing on the bridge of the UES Nemesis, watching as the stars streaked past, Elena thought of the future that lay ahead. The war was far from over, but the dawn of hope had broken through the darkness. Humanity and its allies were united in their fight for survival, and the promise of a brighter future was within reach. With a determined gaze, Elena turned her attention to the tasks ahead, ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. The struggle was far from finished, but the coalition was stronger than ever, and the fight against the Zarai would continue until the galaxy was free from their tyranny. If you enjoy this video, then don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell.